Hello and welcome back to the season finale of the Everyday Christian podcast. This is season 9, episode 21, and I have greatly enjoyed this particular season dealing with Christian virtues. I hope that our listeners have as well. Earlier this season, we had a couple of episodes with Brother Barry Kennedy, and we've got his son Josh with us, one of his sons, Josh Kennedy, on the podcast this week to close us out. Josh, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How about yourself, man?
Doing good, doing good. So Josh is a producer with the Scattered Abroad Network. He helps us with scheduling different guests and things like that, some of the behind the scenes work. What else would you like to say about yourself, Josh?
Well, I work as the full-time minister for the Cookville Church of Christ, and I'm also a co-owner for Ironworks Publications and have been working with that for a few months now and really just trying to stay busy as much as I can with different things.
Cool. That's good. And you work in Cookeville, Tennessee, and Brother Don is there. Is that right? Don Blackwell?
That is correct. Yeah, he's one of the elders here, and
Okay.
of course, just got married recently as well. So
And
enjoying married life.
and your wife's name?
Brooke,
Brooke. All right. So enjoying the honeymoon phase. You've been married how long now?
October 19th
October
was the
19th. Okay.
official day.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. So we're recording this
Thank you.
in the subsequent March. This episode, of course, will come out in May. But again, we appreciate you, Josh, for tuning in and helping us with this episode. We're talking about the Christian virtue of love for this final discussion of this season. I can't think of a better way to close out the season than to talk about love. I think about how Jesus said the two greatest commandments were to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. We're going to talk about First Corinthians chapter 13. I think that's a great way to summarize this virtue of love. And a lot of this, I guess, will mainly deal with our love that we have for our neighbor. But certainly, we also need to think about the love that we should have for God. So, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and read this passage from First Corinthians 13, and then let's have some questions about kind of each one of these different attributes of love. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. So this is the famous passage in First Corinthians chapter 13. If you have the old King James version, the word is charity, which gives a different nuance to the idea of love. What does this passage say about the endurance of love, Josh?
There's so much that can be described from this chapter regarding endurance, so many other aspects of it as well. I think the endurance aspect that's really shown here is Paul is really trying to get to the heart of what the church's real mission is. I mean, if you look at the previous accounts, like in chapter 12 and things of that nature, how they were engaged in, like, oh, we're going to be involved in the miracles and these things, and that's what we're gauging our value on. Paul says, no, love is the one enduring aspect of a Christian's life. You know, we can hope in the Lord, we have faith in the Lord, but at some point, that's going to be proven. When we're standing before the pearly gates, there's not going to be a hope anymore. There's no expectation. We're there. Love is the only thing that transcends all of time, all of distance, and in every culture. And it's really just fascinating to see how Paul addresses that in this particular passage and shows just how strong such a concept is.
Absolutely. I was thinking about a Bible study I actually had last night with some folks, and one of the people that we studied with was a little younger, and I was trying to help her understand, her mom mentioned, about the existence of God, and although we don't see God, we know He's there. And I said, well, we don't see love, but we see the effects of love. I told this girl, I said, your parents love you because they show you that they love you through their actions, through
Hmm.
providing for you, giving you a place to live, feeding you, all these different things. And so, love is definitely something that is transcendent, and it's a wonderful, wonderful Christian virtue. So I thought it was a great way for us to wrap up our season. So appreciate you saying those thoughts about the endurance of love and how it will continue compared to faith and hope, which those are looking forward to when we will be with God for all of eternity. Love will remain when we are with God for all of eternity. I want to walk through these
Absolutely.
different attributes of love. And again, these are all found in 1 Corinthians 13. The first one being love suffers long. I think key in this description is suffers. Love suffers. We may not think of it that way very often, but it truly does. If we love somebody, let's think maybe our spouse. There may be some suffering as as we're married, and we have to go through some suffering together. It may be some hard times, some financial difficulty, loss of a job, or house burns down, or some tragedy in our lives, physical illness. There's all kinds of things that we may have to suffer through together. But if we truly love our spouse, we're going to walk through that suffering together, hand in hand. I think about sometimes people will abandon their loved ones when life gets difficult. That's not love. So, do you have any thoughts along those lines, Josh,
No.
or anything you want to add to this? The idea of love suffers long.
Well, there's a couple things I think you could add to that. I mean, first of all, I heard this quote a long time ago, and it's really stuck with me that love is never truly known until challenged. And that's a real concept I think we see involved in First Corinthians chapter 13.
I think we lost Josh, but you know what? I can call him on the phone.
I just noticed it cut out.
That's all right. We'll keep rolling, Josh. So, I think there's an internet issue. So, as you were saying,
Yeah, I was saying how we see how love really shows itself in challenge, and how you look at passages such as Second Peter chapter 3 verse 9. The Lord is not slack concerning His promises, some men count slackness, but is long suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And we also see that mirrored in Ephesians chapter 4 verse 2. It says, "With all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing one another in love." And how all of those things connect, how they all work together
to show that love that God has that is greater than any that we might even consider in our own finite way of.
having a little bit of technical difficulties, folks. You got to love technology, right? So,
Always works until you know.
yeah, it always works until it doesn't. But we're kind of in and out on our call on the internet right now. But I've got Josh on the phone, and if we have to bring him back through on the phone, we'll do that. But that's all right. We'll just roll with it. So, let's see. Let's go to the next one. Love is kind. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. Are we kind to people? If we love people, we're going to be kind to them. Gentleness is and kindness both are in the fruit of the spirit. I want to bring in Proverbs 31 verse 26 about the virtuous woman. It says, "On her tongue is the law of kindness." Well, that doesn't just apply to ladies, but also gentlemen as well. We all need to be kind if we're going to love one another. You have any thoughts on this one?
I think that's absolutely true. And, we even see commands in the New Testament as well, like Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32, where he says, "And be kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as Christ, or God in Christ has forgiven you." And we see something interesting in that as well. Kindness is not niceness. That's not the same thing. I hear a lot of times people say, if you can't be nice to somebody, don't say anything at all. Well, the difference between niceness and kindness is quite interesting because the word nice means really harmless. You're harmless. Kindness means you're showing goodness to someone. Well, that can sometimes be uncomfortable. That can
Right.
sometimes be damaging in the grand scheme of things because sometimes conflict comes from that. But you're being kind to them because you want what's best for them.
Yep, that's a great point. I think that sometimes the niceness cop out, if you will, gets a lot of folks in trouble because sometimes there are some hard truths that have to be said, and uh,
Absolutely.
we can be accused of not being nice. Or they might say, well, you're not kind. No, we are kind.
Mhm.
We're just having to say something that needs to be said. And we do so in a loving way, but we
Oh
have to
yeah,
speak the truth in love, Ephesians 4, verse 15. If we love somebody,
absolutely.
we're going to tell them the truth. What
Well,
about this? Go ahead.
I was just saying that, sometimes you see this in, my wife's in nursing school right now, and she was talking about some of the stories that she's had of people in the medical field and how sometimes the nurses are not very nice to you, but they're doing it because they're telling you, hey, you need to do this or else we can't do our job. Well,
Right.
that's a kindness to them because they're trying to get it taken care of.
Yeah, you won't recover if you don't listen to the nurses and the doctors. So, what about
Absolutely.
this next one? Love does not envy. I think I wrote these words in a sermon one time. I'm trying to remember back, but basically, what I wrote was envy or jealousy is a happiness killer. If we think about that, if we're envious of other people, it is going to destroy our happiness. I looked up a definition for envy. It says a feeling of discontented or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. So basically, we're dealing with the same concept of covetousness, envy, covetousness, same idea. Love doesn't do that. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a couple things you could talk about with this because if you go to Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30, it carries the same idea as what you just said, where Solomon wrote, a sound heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones. The idea there is almost like a cancer. It eats away at them. It's like it's dissolving them. So you don't have strength in a life that is consumed by envy. And then we go over to James chapter 3, which, people call the Proverbs of the New Testament. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 16, he says, for where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are. Well, if love is allowing envy to thrive, it can't exist. Those are not two mutually allowed ideas that can work together. If you have love for someone in its own essence, there is a level of selflessness. I can't love you if I'm looking for only things for myself.
Yep.
And so I think that that's a really powerful point that Paul is making here is he's telling them, listen, love and envy cannot coincide. Just something that they were engaging in a little bit in that day and age with the miracles of chapter 12.
That's a great point. And I think about doing marital counseling with folks and going through this section with them. If we truly love somebody, we're going to think of them or we're going to think of our spouse ahead of ourselves. So you make a great point there. Love does not parade itself. We might say, I might put it this way, it doesn't put on a show or, hey, look at me. That's not the attitude and mindset of love. Any thoughts on that one?
I heard a preacher describe this one time. It says, how well do you think your marriage would work if every time you walked in the door, you say, aren't you glad you're married to me? Aren't you
Right.
so glad that I'm so wonderful?
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. And love itself, as we mentioned before, that selflessness, it's not a level of putting yourself down necessarily, but it's a level of reality, an understanding of the reality that you're in. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 2 says, let another man praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips. And I think it's interesting how we consider that thought process. I mean, think about how it would appear to us if someone got up at some award show or something and no one had nominated them for anything. They had received no accolades, no awards, no nothing. But they get up into the podium and say how wonderful they are and how thankful they are that everyone loves them and all of these things. We'd say, why was that person interrupting the show?
Right.
What was that person doing? Why they're not supposed to be there?
I'm going to let you finish, but
Yeah.
some people might get the reference. But anyways,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
That,
Um,
that that really shows a lot about a person's character
right.
and how they show themselves. So
Definitely. And speaking of that, the next one, love is not puffed up. Kind of the same idea, pride. Proverbs 6, verses 16 and the first part of 17. These six things the Lord hates. Yes, seven are an abomination to him. A proud look. Very first thing on the list is a proud look. God hates pride. Love is not puffed up. Love is not prideful or arrogant. I think that's pretty self explanatory. You have anything to add to that?
absolutely. Well, I think with that, that's a perfect example. I mean, to start off with a list of things that God hates, and then it starts with pride. And I think some people make a mistake with pride. I think some people believe that pride itself is mutually or is exclusively just how great I am, or thinking of yourself greater than you should. There's also a level of pride in thinking that you're the greatest victim of all time, or involved in all these things. Everything's against me. Well, of course, that's going to lead to a lot of other problems as well. So I think that that's something that
To address in this discussion.
That is a great
So
point. You had something to add to that?
that's where we need. The only thing I would add to that, I think, would be if we're looking at an example of Christ and trying to be Christians, Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 and 8, about Jesus humbling himself to the form of a servant.
Yep.
This is the very being who said, "Let there be light." And he says, "No, I'm going to humble myself to a servant to show you who you should be and how you should act."
Great point. A lot of these, all of this goes together. And we may think of some examples. Maybe we've run into some people that are very unloving according to these definitions. And because there's pride and there's envy and there's, how about this one? The next one, rudeness, right? Sometimes we might see this. Love does not behave rudely. Rudeness seems like it is so common these days. I don't know. I'm 34 years old. You're in your 20s. Is that right, Josh?
At 24.
24. So I'm about 10 years older than you. Does it seem like people in the last 5 years or so have gotten so much ruder than they used to have been?
I described it this way. I think that in a lot of ways, people have so, in our attempts to, I guess, in a better way, sanitize society and trying to make sure everything is taken a certain way. I think in doing so, we've actually created one of the rudest generations, because we don't care and we just say whatever we want to, or we're rude to people who don't fit our standard of what it means to be polite.
Right.
And so, when you consider it in this perspective here, I mean, you look at what Paul said in other rules, such as Ephesians chapter 5, verse 4, or Colossians chapter 4, where he said, "Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer one another." I mean, God tells us our speech is to be different. That's not just in the words we say, it's in how we say them. It's in our intention behind what we say as well. So I think all has to work together in order for this loving attitude to be allowed to stay.
Great points. I think about how people out and about, maybe at restaurants or the grocery store or even driving, road rage. It seems like road rage is so common nowadays. And it's just, I think people have become so self-absorbed that it's all about themselves instead of others. And so love is going to put others ahead of self. So again, we said at the very outset of this episode, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's going to help, all these problems with people not ascribing these attributes to themselves. That's going to help solve those problems. So I guess
Absolutely.
it's kind of a pet peeve of mine, just to, when you see people just being rude to maybe like a waiter or something, waitress, it's just, come on, we've got to do better, especially if we're Christians. Christians should not be treating people rudely. Love does not seek
Absolutely.
its own. So that is the idea of it's not selfish. So love is not selfish.
Mhm.
It is selfless. You have any thoughts on that one?
A perfect tie-in for where we just were with this idea of rudeness. I mean, where do these rude comments that we hear come from? Well, it's because of how I felt about something. I want to be done about something. And there are scriptures all throughout the New Testament of how Christians are to view themselves. We have a level that we're supposed to think of ourselves in terms of value. I mean, we understand that we are created in the image of God. We understand that Christ died for us. He saw value within us in that aspect. But we also see passages such as Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, where it says, "Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself." So you want to put others ahead. Why? Because that's what Jesus did. And also, on top of that, it's interesting, the people who think the least about themselves in the sense of a pride aspect are some of the people who are the happiest because they put that joy in others and
Yep,
taking care of others and making sure they're cared for.
absolutely. If we follow all these attributes of love in our lives, it's going to make us happier. Sometimes we think about the idea of God wants me to be happy. Well, He does according to His way. God does not want us to be happy in sin. and there's consequences
Mm-hmm.
for sin, and there's tremendous unhappiness if we get caught up in sin. But if we live according
Absolutely.
to God's way, we will have happiness, and more so than
Yeah,
happiness, we'll have joy, which is even
absolutely.
whatever circumstance comes our way, we're still going to have that deeper level, if you will, of happiness, joy, because we know in the back of our mind that we're God's people, we're Christians, and we know what
Hmm.
happens in the end.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And on top of that too, when people say God wants me to be happy, they're using a different definition.
Right.
And I think that's a good way of bringing up what you just mentioned there earlier of having joy versus happiness. Happiness is a fleeting thing. We can be happy in any number of things, and I heard a guy describe it on one occasion how happiness is really just the absence of your stress at that moment.
Right.
You know, the things that are on your mind are temporarily gone. So when do we feel happy? Well, when we're out doing something else, when we're having our or enjoying our hobbies, things of that nature. But God wants us to have peace of mind no matter the circumstance. So it's a much more fulfilling aspect, what you were talking about there with that idea of joy instead of happiness.
Great point. Love is not provoked, not quick to fly off the handle, we might say, or not quick to be angry, be in a rage, wrathful, however we want to say that. I'm going to go read James 1, verses 19 and 20. James 1, verses 19 and 20 says, So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. What do you have there, Josh?
Well, you just think about that. Let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. If I think about how many problems in our world could be fixed by just listening. I mean, one of the number one currently at this particular juncture, one of the number one things that dissolves relationships, whether that be dating or marriage, is a lack of communication, a lack of effective communication. I'm not able to tell you how I feel. And so when we look at it from this perspective here, God has always focused on communication. I mean, think about how he spread his message in the first place. He sends preachers to do his work, ministers to go out and to preach the message. He's very about effective communication. And we think about Proverbs chapter 19, for instance, the discretion of a man makes him slow to anger, and his glory is to overlook a transgression. A discretion, he's not quick to pick up, he picks his battles wisely rather than just jumping into it. And we think about Proverbs 26 is another good example to go for there, where Solomon writes about how answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou be a lot, or lest he be wise in his own conceits, but according to his folly, lest thou be like unto him. He's saying there, it's not a contradiction there in that passage. He's saying, hey, pick your battles wisely. Only fight the battles that actually would do good. And when we think about this instance here, love is not easily provoked. That's interesting. He put that in there. It's not easily provoked, meaning it can be. There
Right.
is a time and a place in a loving relationship where anger is warranted.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it from the perspective of even how God feels. If we cheat on God from a spiritual standpoint, how does he feel?
Yeah.
What is his
Angry.
response to that? It's anger. It's anger. Why? Because he has a right to be angry because we violated the conditions of the arrangement. And so I think that's a very interesting point to bring up there because anger itself is not sinful. A lot of the characteristics that we have are not sinful in of themselves. For instance, jealousy is not inherently sinful, but there are circumstances where jealousy is very sinful. And so when we talked about that with envy earlier, that's being jealous for something that's not yours, doesn't belong to you. But we can be jealous for the things that are ours. You're not allowed to go into my house and take something. I'm jealous about that. Why? That's mine. And so I think with this entire section here, what God is doing here through the pen of Paul, he is framing these characteristics as saying there are a way of handling this and there's a way of not handling this. This is the side of love, the side that I have established. This is the side of the world that has nothing to do with me.
Great thoughts. Love thinks no evil. I go back to Proverbs 6 again, verse number 14. Proverbs 6, verse 14 says, perversity is in his heart, talking about a worthless, wicked man. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. And then we go back to the 7 things God hates along the lines of evil, thinking evil, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil. So love thinks no evil. Love has no regard for evil, we might say. It does not enjoy evil. Romans 1, verse 32, after a very long list of sinful things, it talks about not only those who do those things, but also those who have pleasure in them that do so. So we cannot have any pleasure whatsoever in evil. Love does not do that. You have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think there's another aspect to this as well. Love thinks no evil could also entail love dwells on no evil. I think about this from the perspective of we're both preachers, so we've both seen this in churches that are around. How many people sit there and they keep score of everything that annoys them or everything that bothers them? And it just builds up and builds up and builds up until what happens? Well, you have to talk to somebody. You have to get that out somehow. And usually it's in a very damaging way. And this is the same thing in this aspect, talking about love. The Church of Christ is supposed to be a family, those who are all connected in their love for God and in their love for the truth. Well, if I am allowing myself to dwell on evil things, First John chapter 1 tells me that God is a light and in him is no darkness at all. If I'm dwelling on those evil things, I have no part with it. I have no connection with him because what I'm filling my mind with is only the evil things. And so when he says love thinks no evil, it's not keeping a record of these things. It's not going back and being historical about the problems that we've had. It says, no, we're moving forward. We're focused on what is good, what is true, what is honest. And so I think that's a powerful point. And I'm glad that I think it's interesting he puts it closer to the end of this list because he's saying this is where it's all coming to. This is the summation of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that is a great point. And, the New King James Version does say thinks no evil, but I'm looking at a footnote in my Bible. It does have the idea of does not keep records of wrongdoing, just like you're saying. I'm glad you thought to mention that because I overlooked that in my notes. And that is a very, very important thing to remember in regard to this. Some translations do say the idea of love keeps no account of wrongs. So great point. We've got about 10 minutes remaining. Let's see here. Let's go through love does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Again, Romans 1:32 applies, just like we talked about. Sin does not need to be celebrated or tolerated. Romans 6, verses 1 and following, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. Romans 6 is dealing with those who have been converted, baptized into Christ. And we're not to continue in willful, unrepentant sin. What do you have? What thoughts do you have on does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth?
Ironically, I preached a sermon yesterday regarding this and how there are so many Christians who tend to have this mindset of if I wasn't a Christian, I would be X. If I was a Christian, I would want to do this thing, or I would want to do this thing, or this thing. And I said in the sermon that what you're showing in that is there is a very fine barrier between you and the world. Yeah. And as soon as that barrier is gone, which can be over any number of things, that's where you're going to be. That's what you want to do. That's where your heart is dwelling. Romans chapter 12, verse 9 tells us, let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor which is evil, literally hate it to your core, cling to what is good. And this is right after verses 1 and 2, where he says, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind and may prove is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So what Paul is writing there in the book of Romans connects directly with what he's saying in First Corinthians, where he's saying, love does not engage in these things because a person who dwells on evil cannot have the capacity to love the way that God is describing here. They cannot coincide. So I think that there is almost this worship of evil in our society, especially with those who are members of the church, because they feel like they're left out. But the reality is, it's not that we're left out, we're protected from.
Great point. Everything that, every commandment that we find in God's word, it was given for our good, our benefit. I preached a sermon a month or so ago from one of the Psalms that talks about the beauty of holiness. There's beauty to holiness, to righteous living. And God, again, he told us the things that he told us for a reason and for our benefit. And like you're saying, we're being protected when we live according to God's ways. And there's true happiness and contentment and joy. Read the book of Ecclesiastes, right? the conclusion of the whole matter: fear God and keep His commandments. This is man's all. This is the whole duty of man. There's true happiness, fulfillment, joy, contentment, etc., in living according to God's ways. All right, let's go to these last four, and we'll read these together. These are often quoted together. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. What do you have for these, Josh?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways we can break this down. I mean, we talk about the bearing aspect. It's interesting because he puts this in a format that really builds on itself. You bear all things, meaning the things that you're not exactly happy with, the things that are not exactly comfortable to deal with, you still stick through it. I don't get to say just because I don't like brother so and so who sits on the third row that I get to walk away from the church.
Right.
I bear those things. Why? Because my love for God surpasses my anger about this wickedness or this individual, whether it be wickedness or just annoyance. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. But then that leads into believes all things. If I'm going to believe in what God has said and believe in these individuals as well, you think about how all of this would have how this works. I mean, think about Barnabas and Paul. When Paul became a Christian in Acts chapter 9, verses 26 and 27, we find he tries to go to the brethren. Well, obviously his background makes them a little skittish about that. What do you mean you're going to try to join us? You're the guy who's been throwing us in prison and killing our family members. What do you think you're going to do with us? But Barnabas said, no, he's one of us. He's going to be a part of us. He believed in Paul because he believed in the truth. He understood God has the power to change hearts and minds. So I'm going to trust that this is the case. And then when we see that belief, if I'm believing in you, I have hope or an expectation that these things are going to follow through, whether it be with a love for God or a love for my fellow Christians. And we see that in many aspects. I think about Paul hoping for the salvation of Israel in Romans chapter 10. He says, I wish myself were accursed so that they could be saved. And we think about as well the prodigal son. Did the prodigal son doubt that if he went home, that his father could take him back in some way, whether that be a servant or whether that be a son? He had hope in his father. He had expectation in his father. I know what kind of a man he is. And so then it ends with this endurance. And I think it's funny that we end right where we started. The love's endurance. Those things are exhausting. I mean, you think about that from the perspective of a married individual. There's times where you're disappointed in your spouse. They don't do what you thought they were going to do. They don't fulfill that hope you had for them. And so what does that do? It starts the cycle. I hope you're going to do something. I have expectation you're going to do something. You don't do it. I bear it. Well, we have struggles together. We work together. We believe in each other to get through that goal. Same thing is true with Christ. We believe that he will follow through with the things he told us, that he's made his promises, and those things are true. And that restarts the cycle of hope and expectation and endurance all again. And when you face these consequences, when you face these troubles, you get stronger the next time. You push. But the problem with many people is, unlike Job, who saw the consequences that he faced, all the difficulties that he faced, and came through stronger, many individuals let those things break them. They give up. That's a shortcoming of the love of the world versus the love of God. The love of God, it never fails. It never falls away. It never gives up. It never takes a holiday. So I think that's a great place for this to stop, because that's where the rubber meets the road, is that endurance of this love and how it will last far beyond anything that comes hereafter.
Great thoughts, Josh. That is a great way to wrap up not only this episode, but the season on Christian virtues, season 9 of the Everyday Christian podcast. And Josh, really appreciate you. Josh always comes ready to deliver. He always does a very good job in preparation for these various podcasts that he helps us with. So appreciate you, Josh. That was some great thoughts. And I want to go preach a sermon on 1 Corinthians 13 now. I think I'll have to add that to my sermon prep. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
It's always, yes, sir. It's always a joy to go through this section. It's one of the most well-beloved, no pun intended, well-beloved passages in the Bible. But it's a good one. It's one we need frequent reminder of. And all of us, I mean, we all struggle in some way to, fully fulfilling these various attributes in our lives. So it's helpful to go back through this list and I've done the thing before with couples getting ready to get married. Hey, insert your name in here and see if it still fits. That sort of thing. Chase believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, and that can be helpful too. A little exercise just to say, okay, am I living out these attributes of love? So again, excellent thoughts, Josh.
Absolutely.
This has been really good. The internet issues we've dealt with is, it'll be okay because we got some really good content in this episode. Thank you, all of our listeners, for tuning in to this season 9 of the podcast. I cannot believe we've already gone through 9 seasons. Seems like we just started this, but Lord willing, we will be back in August for season 10 of the Everyday Christian Podcast. I am going to withhold a theme for the season, so you'll have to find out in August, mainly because I'm still thinking about it. So we will get there and we will figure it out. But looking forward to season 10, Lord willing, the first Monday in August.